Hello, everybody. On today's episode, we welcome a long-time high-stakes cash game pro, owner of his own training platform, a digital entrepreneur, and a keynote speaker. We're delighted to introduce to the PokerDeals Podcast, Mr. Alec Torelli. Welcome, Alec. How are you doing?
Hey, thanks for having me here. Appreciate it. Excited to be here. Love doing these.
Awesome. What have you been up to lately? What's going on?
Well, my schedule's been pretty crazy. I'm playing a lot of poker. So
Okay.
our games usually run from like Friday at 4 until Saturday at like 8 or 8 a.m. or something.
Mm-hmm.
And then I kind of have to sleep for 2-3 hours and then um, work out, review, get ready, and then get up Sunday and do the same thing because we play Sunday pretty much the same schedule. So I end up playing and then sometimes we play on Wednesdays. So I end up playing 30, 40 hours a week in 2-3 days.
Yeah.
Which is fun but challenging. And then I've been that sort of forced me to stay sharp and study poker and keep on top doing what I love. And then that's the weekend. So the weekend, it almost feels to me like that's my break for my week, which is cool because it's like I get the weekend off and I get to just play poker. So it's awesome. And then during the week, so if I look a little tired, I'm sorry. I got up, I played all night last night and then I barely slept and then I coached all afternoon.
Okay.
And then I got up, at like 7 a.m. for this interview. So I'm like, I'm a little tired.
Did you at least win?
Yes, overall I'm winning. I lost last session.
Okay.
Overall,
Okay.
overall
Well,
I'm winning. Yeah,
there we go.
Yeah, exactly. It's worth it. So and then I've been coaching as well. Like been staying in SoCal for the past year and a half, seeing family and because I didn't see them for a year and a half because of COVID. I was like in Italy when COVID hit. I was locked down there.
Oh, that's
and
not
so
a good place to be.
No, not at all. And so I'm catching up for lost time with family, which is awesome. I've been very into crypto. So I've been coaching a lot of poker too, just, here and there, like with clients in LA or in Santa Barbara or some people in Orange County. But I've been really into crypto as well and like trading and learning a lot about the space. So I've been in this space since 2017, but of course, like during, a big bull market, like what happened with QE and money printing in during COVID, that flooded a lot of capital into the equities markets and the housing market, and of course the crypto market benefited from that as well, although it's the most asymmetric. It had the biggest upside in all the markets. So that was really fun to be a part of for the last year and a half, and taking what I learned and the mistakes I made in the 2017 bull market and the bear market of 2018, and then trying not to repeat those mistakes this time. And so learning about that, and it's kind of a game similar to poker where you have to have capital management, you have to take risks, you have to it's kind of like playing a tournament. So there's a lot of those sorts of elements to trading too, and there's different styles and different ways to do it. So a lot of my social circle is very involved in that, from poker over into crypto. So those are the things I've been focused on mainly in the past year. It's been awesome.
Yeah, you got a lot going on. It sounds like if your break at the weekend is 40 hours of poker or whatever, then it's pretty full on. But let's go back to the beginning. Like, how did you even get into poker?
Well, I was 16 and Moneymaker had just won the main event.
The classic.
And yeah, I have like the typical coming of age story for a poker player. Like I was in high school. You hear about this guy that wins the main event, and then of course it's on TV. So it's on ESPN, which is like the biggest channel here in the US, like right up there, primetime television. Instead of watching a basketball game during the week or something, you would turn on ESPN and then there'd be like poker. And so it was this new game, and I was never really great at sports. I didn't make my high school basketball team. I quit football my freshman year, but like poker was being portrayed as this sport, but the slogan was anyone could win, and it was a game where you had to use like psychology and your wits and your intellect instead of your physical ability. I'm 5'9", I'm not going to be like some great athlete, and so that was really appealing to me because I loved chess, but I was never obviously great at chess. But so poker was just like really appealing to me from this sort of perspective, and then I could also play with friends. So a friend of mine invited me to his house after the beach one day in the summer, and it was a home game. We bought in $5 or something, and I won $12 my first time playing. And they always say like the worst thing that could happen to a gambler is they win their first time because, then you're hooked, right? So I won my first time. I beat my friends out of money. And these were all like, the cool kids in our high school that were all like great at sports, and they were like the jocks and whatever. And like, I'm like sitting here beating them at poker. So for me, it was like, oh my God, this is really cool. I kind of found something I could be good at, So it was me and this one other guy, and we ended the night, and like everyone else had left. And it was like me and him counting our chips and like dividing up the little pile of cash, and I was like, wow, this is amazing, right? Like, this is so cool. And so it was also around that time when like everyone was getting a summer job. We're 16, we just got our license. People were starting to work because you can have like a work permit at that around that age. And people start to want to make money to like, you have to pay for things. You want gas, you're going on dates, like, you want to have like money. So to me, it was like, okay, if I like, and so I sort of started thinking like, maybe I could like, win this money playing poker. Right. And so it was like the perfect storm of the macro environment of what was happening in the poker world, as well as like where I was at in my life with, being able to just dedicate so much time to playing poker at that period with, no responsibility and like no real risk if I lost, so I could just dedicate all my free time to playing poker without any, responsibility or downside. And so that just plunged me into this industry of poker, and I just started playing as much as I can. I started playing online when I could. I played all through the summer and during the school year with home games with friends. I was always pretty good student. Like I got straight A's until I found poker. Started getting some B's. But I was already admitted into college. That was going into my junior year. I like pushed through it. And then my senior year, I was already admitted to college. So I basically could play poker and not have any detriment to like my studies, so I just dedicated my whole senior year to poker. I started playing online. I read the couple books that were available, and, that really put me on the poker scene. Like I started doing very well in those games. We also had local casinos around here in Southern California where we could go to 18 and over casinos. So I could go play poker live and get like, this amazing experience playing pretty much any size games I want, right at an early age. So that like I had a huge poker ecosystem from which I could like learn from and get better at, starting at a young age.
Yeah. So what did your parents think, when little Alec comes home and he's like, okay, I made my $12 in this game, I'm going to do this?
Yeah. I mean, so at the time I was always very like, I don't know, hustling, entrepreneurial. I always kind of had like something I was doing to like get by and make money. Like when I was 10 or 12, I was baking. I bought this cookbook and I was baking goods for the neighborhood shop. But then like, they started to ask where these pastries came from, and then they were like, well, they came from this kid's house, and then they had to stop me because it wasn't like a certified kitchen.
Yeah.
But at that time when I was 16, I had a flyer delivery business. So I would get paid like 10 cents per flyer per house to deliver flyers to other people's houses. And so I was making like quite a bit of money doing this, at least for my standards at the time. I was 16. So like $100 a weekend is like life-changing, right? So I was doing this every Saturday. I would get up at 7 a.m. I remember this guy, I don't want to say his name because it's just a random guy, but I remember the guy's name that I was delivering flyers for, and he had other clients. And so we were, my friend and I, Ricky and whatever, we would go out every Saturday morning. We would deliver flyers. We'd hustle like 5 hours a day, sometimes on Sundays or during the week after school. And so I was making like a decent amount of money for my standards relative to the size of the home games I was playing. And so, most kids have an allowance. I did as well. When I started playing poker, my parents were like, like they said all the classic things a parent would say, nothing that would shock you. They were always very supportive though, because they saw like how, studious I was and how much I loved the game and whatever. But they were like, we're not giving you any more money. So I would have to either win at poker or continue to like operate this flyer delivery business in such a way that I can like employ my friends to like deliver the flyers and take a cut of the difference between the money that the companies paid me and the money I paid the companies, and or win at poker. So I would always on my own bankroll, because my parents were like, look, we're not going to give you $20 a week or $10 a week or whatever the number was, and then you go lose it at poker and then you ask us for more. Like, we're not going to facilitate this sort of arrangement. So they cut me off basically, and I respected that. I think that's very smart. Yeah, very smart. Like I very respect that decision even at the time. So that was always our relationship, but like they were very, very supportive. Like when I told, I'll fast forward a couple of years, I was at SMU. I had a partial scholarship to the university in Dallas, Texas. And I decided, like, I was at a pivotal point in my like poker journey. This was like 2 years into my journey, and I was making like a decent amount of money. I was playing 5-10, so whatever, do the math, whatever you will. And I was playing local home games in Dallas, Texas, and I was winning a lot in some of these big home games. Like I got kicked out of one of the big home games in Dallas because I won too much. And I was realizing I was at a point in my career where like I was either going to have to like, dedicate my time to poker, right? Like my dream was to travel the world and play in these tournaments that I saw people playing in, go to the Bahamas or Aruba or Barcelona, wherever, and play in these tournaments and travel the world and have poker pay for it. That was my dream. I never really wanted I never really wanted to make, millions of dollars. I wanted to just be able to live the lifestyle that I saw these people living on TV, and then being able to do that through poker to me seemed like the ultimate win. That was just the goal for me. And so I was like, look, I could do this, but I'm not going to be able to commit my time to school. And so I remember dropping out of SMU, and it was my, beginning of my freshman year. And, I told my parents, and they were like, surprisingly both very supportive. My parents are divorced. So I had two,
conversations.
two conversations to have. This is the tragedy of divorced parents. I mean, there's many tragedies. This is one of the tragedies of divorced parents. You have two conversations, right? When you get in trouble, you have two fucking sorts of parents, right? So I had to have this conversation twice, and both parents were very supportive. But my parents made me pay them back for school. They're like, look, you came to school, we paid for college. I was only on a partial scholarship. So let's say it was half the cost of whatever it was, which is still a very expensive university. So I had to pay them back, for school, which again, I respect. I went to school, I took their dime to do it, and I dropped out, and so I didn't fulfill that commitment, right?
Yeah.
So I paid them back for university. For that semester, and then they were very supportive the whole time. I'm very, very lucky. I think that's like very important. Also, my wife too, which we can get into later. I met her when I was 24. Super, super supportive, and I think that's like very important for any endeavor, but especially an esoteric profession like poker. Like if you're going to do something like off, the beaten path, like you're going to be an artist or a musician, or you're going to pursue an entrepreneurial thing. Or poker, it's all kind of the same, right? It's like this non-conventional thing where you need a support system of people around you, because it's not going to be a straight linear line to success. If you don't have that support system, especially at a young age, like when I was 18 dropping out of school, or 24 when I met my wife, like whatever, it's going to be very tough.
That is for sure. Did you ever consider quitting at any point?
Absolutely. Quitting poker, you mean? To like do something else? Like, I'm going to go get a job, or I'm not going to make it, or
like this is too much, I'm not going to make it, all these kind of
I still consider quitting poker, dude. Yeah, like that happens all the time. That's like super normal. I think I always knew I was going to play poker, and I would say I still always know that, like I'm always going to play some poker in my life. But I have the times where I'm like, so going back to before I was like, I would say like successful at poker, before I like kind of made it in poker, and I knew that had reached a point where I could like, pay for things or just, travel and live my dream in poker. I definitely had moments where I was like, I went bust, or, I mismanaged my money, and I was 18 years old, so even if I made $30,000 or something, like, which is life-changing at 18, like I didn't have, a degree in finance. I didn't have a degree in bankroll management. Like you don't get taught these things, right? You learn these things through making mistakes. So I had a point where I went bust early, and this probably happened multiple times. I mean, like I probably went bust when I made like $1,000 and lost it. I don't really count that, because it's just like, it's one upswing. It's not even an upswing and a downswing. It's like a win or two and a loss or two, right? Like when you have no money, it's easy to go bust. But I would say like I went bust like after having built a bankroll, like up to like, let's say like 20,000 or 10,000, and this was all, 17, 18, 19, those sorts of ages, multiple times. And so like those were so devastating, where I would just be like, what am I doing, right? Like I'm quitting school, I'm like, I should be going to class, and like everyone around me, all my friends, my social circle, like in college, nobody else is doing what I'm doing. They're all telling me I'm like just an idiot, and I'm gonna fail. I'm like, I'm never gonna make it at this profession. Especially this was at a time in 2005 when poker was like even more esoteric than it is now. There weren't this, like my generation was the generation that came up and that like sort of redefined poker and like re-portrayed the image from like the old classic Sammy Farha gambler with a cigar, Stu Unger, whatever, Doyle with the Texas hat, to like this new generation of like online kids that had made it. That was my story, and that was the story of my peers. So like there wasn't this story in public media for people to like see and understand, and then like say, oh, you could be like that person, So there was no person for people to understand who I was going to be like. So there's the collective group around me was all thinking I was, stone idiotic. And then, when you lose at that time, and then, you're supposed to be doing something else, right? You're taking this unconventional path. It's very, very hard. So I had many times where I was like, oh my God, just so devastated from the loss. But I think I wanted to win more than I hated losing. And that was always like what drove me, like I heard this great quote, which I recommend everyone watch, The Last Lecture by Randy Pausch. This guy is a university professor, and he talks about, what would be the last lecture you'd give before you die if you had to give one lecture. And then tragic story, the guy gets diagnosed with a terminal illness, so he actually gives his fucking last lecture. It's like a crazy story. It's very sad, but it's also super inspiring because the guy's an incredible speaker. Anyway, he says that, like, brick walls aren't there to keep you out. It's there to show you how bad you want it. And I was like, listen to this at an impressionable time too. And I was like, wow, that's like a really brilliant quote, because like, every setback and every, bust and every like thing in life that happens is like a brick wall. And like sometimes, it makes you realize you don't actually want something as bad as you thought you wanted, which is fine. Like when I was learning piano, I hit a bunch of brick walls and I said, fuck this. I don't actually want to learn as bad as I want to play. Like I'd love to be Neo in the Matrix and be able to play, but I don't actually want to sweat and study to learn. But poker was never like that for me. I always wanted to be on top. I always wanted to be, world class and play at the highest levels and travel the world and like, be there. So, you got to find that thing in life where like the brick walls don't hold you back, because otherwise you're just never going to make it, because there's always going to be someone that hits an obstacle and pushes harder than you, So that was kind of always my story with poker.
So what would be your advice to finding that thing?
Like, I think you have to try a lot of things. And I think you have to, you have to you have to say no to things a lot faster than most people do. Okay. Most people know that that whatever they're doing is not the thing they want to do, but like, they just kind of keep going with like inertia, right? So they're just kind of like on, they stay in a relationship longer than they should, right? They stay in a city longer than they should. They stay in a job longer than they should. They stay in a rental agreement longer than they should, right? Because they know that they're not doing what they want. Or they're not, going the path that really is meaningful to them. But like, it's hard to change, right? Because there's uncomfort. So I think most people at least, rather be comfortably unhappy than uncomfortable with the potential of being happy, right? So there's that, like, there's that brick wall for a lot of people, right? And so I think the key is like, you have to say no a lot faster, because you can't find the yes until you say no to something and open up space in your life to find that thing. So I would go on a lot of first dates with people of the opposite sex, and I would go on a lot of first dates with things that I want to try and experience, but I wouldn't go on many second dates. Whereas I think a lot of people just stay in the relationship, and then, eventually comes to a point where it crashes down because it's not sustainable, both with, actual relationships and with like things that they're doing in their life. So I would go on a lot of first dates, but I wouldn't go on many second dates. And I think that helps accelerate that process, right? Because it's not, there's luck involved. Like, I'm not going to say that I did something meritocratic to find poker. Like, I didn't do anything meritocratic. I turned on the TV, my friend invited me to his house, and I found that thing, but like, so I got lucky. But like, over time in other things in my life, finding things that are really enjoyable, like, you have to try a lot of different things. You have to experience a lot to find that thing, and I think you have to be aware of like what you're really good at. That's probably the other thing, because like, you can channel, you can eliminate a lot of things by understanding like what your superpower is. So we actually have this running joke in our game, and we kind of go around the table and we talk about like everyone's sort of superpower. Like,
okay, that's cool.
Game, right? So like, one guy is really good at like, like cold calling re-raises and like somehow winning the pot, even though he cold called 2 raises with like 5 high, and he just like somehow wins. And then another person's really good at like limping, and another person's really good at like, bluffing all in pre-flop, right? But I think in the real world, everyone has like a superpower. Like, everyone has something that they're very, very good at. Maybe you're good at sales, you're good at communicating, you're good at writing, whatever. And so I think you should like find things that like, if the world's a hammer, you got to find a lot of nails. You got to kind of look at life that way too. You got to find what your hammer is and where the nails are.
Yeah, I completely agree. That was really awesome. In terms of poker, like, can anyone learn to be a great poker player, or do you think there are some inherent traits?
I think anyone could learn to be good. I don't think anyone could learn necessarily to be like great, or maybe they could learn to be great but not world class. Okay. Like, I think there's always that. There's always like an X factor that certain players have that are just like, gonna make them the best. It's kind of like music too, right? Like, I think anyone could learn guitar and anyone could learn to sing. I don't think anyone could just learn to be Taylor Swift. You know, like you have to have a way of being able to like tell a story that's like unique to you, to be able to communicate in a way that like, you know, everyone could relate to. And that's like a gift. You know, like you're a communicator. Like Taylor Swift is a storyteller. She tells stories about relationships. You know, Kanye West tells stories too. You can like or dislike their music, but like they're incredible artists. You know, they're just like, there's an X factor there that you're not going to just train, right? So like if you, it's kind of like that thing where like, you know, if you have to be trained to do something, you're never going to be as good as the person that doesn't need training, right? So it's kind of like that. Like there's that's to be like, but this isn't that relevant because this is to be like, you know, in the NBA. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
like the NBA of poker.
Exactly.
Like to be at that level, I think there has to be something that is there that you're gifted at, or that you're like channeled toward this game. You have the emotional composure, or you have the acumen, you have the math background, you have the technical understanding, you have the game theory, or there's something about you, like your ability to understand like psychology and people, where you can just make high level decisions. And every player has their own X factor. It doesn't always be the same X factor, just like every artist doesn't have the same X factor. But to be like a great player, you know, to be like a collegiate level athlete, let's say, instead of an NBA level athlete, or at least a high school level athlete, which is better than, you know, 99% of the world. Yeah, everyone can learn to do that, I think, for sure.
And what would be like?
I'm pretty confident. I'm pretty confident that everyone could be like a winning player. Let's say a winning player.
Okay, a winning player.
Maybe not everyone, but because everyone is like, you know, there's always exceptions to every rule. So when I say everyone, people are like, oh, well, there's one person, you know, like, but I mean, like, if you're watching this show and you like poker enough to listen to this podcast and you're like here and you're like trying to learn or whatever, I'm pretty confident that you could be a winning player like that. Yeah, that I would say.
Yeah, and winning players, like, it is actually
which is an amazing feat, by the way.
Yeah,
being like, I'm not taking anything away from that. Like, I didn't mean my whole prerequisite to this sounded like, oh, you're drawing dead. I'm just saying, like, being a winning player is like an incredible feat in poker. Like, that's huge. Or even winning at, you know, a decent game like 5-10 or something, like at the Bellagio. Like, I think, you know, everyone watching could probably get to that point if they dedicated a lot of time to it. And it would take different amounts of time for different people, right? So it's not like this you know, everyone is equal path in terms of that, right? Like, it's just like, you know, some people learn languages very quickly, and for some people it takes a long time. But if everyone studied, you know, French for 4 years, everyone would be able to speak French. Different levels, but everyone would be able to like have a conversation, right? And so it's kind of like that with poker. You're not going to basically be like a world-class orator. You might not give a keynote. You might not give a TED talk. You might not, you know, inspire a population, but everyone could have a conversation. It's kind of like that.
What was the toughest for you in poker?
I think the toughest thing to learn were like, you know, the intangibles of the game. I think that's much harder than the game itself for me. Maybe because I came up learning the game, and so it was kind of just like largely a function of like, you know, my education, right? Like I started this thing at 16, and I like, you know, helped evolve the strategy of the game, right? Like the people that were starting to play online at that time, that came up playing online poker as online poker was being released to the public, right? There was no online poker, and then the first people to play were the young internet wizard kids, as they're called, right? And so like we kind of helped develop the strategy of the game. So it really became like kind of innate to me, like how the game works from a strategic level, and then I got to see that evolve over the years. And so like the strategy part, I'm not going to say it's easy because it's changing, and you always have to stay like ahead of the curve. But that kind of like was part of my upbringing and education and my schooling, you know, almost, right? But I think the intangibles of the game are very, very hard. And I think they're even harder today, because I think the strategy today is more pronounced. It's more out there. It's more available. You know, there's computers now that solve like basic spots for people, at least in heads up pots, where you can learn the strategy. You can like open a chart and see all the starting hands you should play, right? I mean, all these things weren't available when I started. We had to kind of learn these things, right? Like, we didn't know that like, you know, whatever, calling 3 bets with these hands wasn't good. Like there was no strategy like that. So now it's even easier to learn the strategy. But I think the hard thing to learn is like, you know, the emotional control, like the intangibles, right? The emotional control, like when to quit a game, you know, the bankroll management side of things, like how your image is changing, you know, maybe that's a little bit more innate, but yeah, just like the emotional control side of things at the table. Because I see a lot of players that are like, you know, technically good poker players, you know. It's not like a language where like if you can speak, you can speak, and you could always speak in any circumstance, right? Poker's a game where like you can have a lot of technical skill, but you might not be able to win because you can't control your emotion or your discipline or your tilt control or your mental game, right? And so I think that's probably the hardest part of poker, and the thing I probably worked the most on, and I would say like the thing that I improved the most on. Like I was not naturally like very mentally composed. I was always like lighthearted and easygoing as a person, but like losing really frustrated me, and I would play like very badly when I was losing like early parts of my career. And now I would say people in my game would say that one of my skills is that I don't get upset when I'm losing. So to go from that being a weakness to a strength was like a lot of work, and I worked with like mental coaches, and I worked very hard on this, throughout my career. And so that's something that like anyone could train, but those things are way harder in my opinion than like learning, which hands to call 3-bets with or something like, or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I completely agree. And I think we just have that feeling of win and loss. Like it's just inbuilt into us.
Yeah.
And obviously when you have an emotional attachment to money, which most of us do, it's not something that, you go to school and you don't really learn those things. So winning and losing in poker is, it's going to hit the emotional side for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I had a conversation. So 2 points, I guess. I had a conversation yesterday. I was talking to a friend of mine, and, we play, I mean, big is relative, but I would say pretty objectively, we play a very, very big game. And, one of our conversations was just about like, buying in different amounts to the game.
Okay.
Because
yep.
like, are you going to play as well with, 250 big blind starting stack as you are with 100 or 150 big blind starting stack, right? And so like, let's say, and also it's also a thing of like, if you double 100 big blind stack or 150, you're at 200, right? So if you buy in 250 and you double, you're at 500. And so like, is your EV going to be the same with 500 big blinds in your game as it is with 250 big blinds in your game? Like, yes, your EV is higher because if you cooler someone or you outplay someone, you win more money because your effective stack depth is deeper. But like, are you going to play as well with 500 big blinds? Because like, the strategy with that stack size is to like be very aggressive in some spots when you have range advantages, right? Like when we're getting into the technical side, but basically like, if your hand range is stronger than your opponent's, you're supposed to pile in a lot of chips. But, piling in 500 big blinds in a high stakes game is like, a lot of variance, and it's a challenge to do at the frequency with which, you're supposed to pile in 500 big blinds often. But I'm just saying like, to keep your frequencies balanced and like to be as aggressive as you're supposed to be in certain spots takes a lot of like a strong mental game, and so we talk about these sorts of things, right? So I think that's important, even even today, like even there's still things that I'm like toying with, and I still focus on the strategy. Like I talked an hour and a half of poker yesterday after my game with someone that I really respect about all the technical spots, but we also talk about all these intangibles. And so when I look on, part of what we built at ConsciousSpoker, like when I look on the market of like, all the content that's available, and I think about like what it takes to actually be great at poker, like I look at it like, there's two circles. There's this circle of strategy and how to be better at playing the game of poker, right? I call it how to be better at playing poker. And then there's another strategy over here, another circle, like how to be a better poker player. And so being better at playing poker and being a better poker player are like very different things. And I think like, I think it's like 50-50, right? I think, being good at ranges, fundamentals, game theory, math, equities, pot odds is as important as, mindset, bankroll management, tilt control,
Absolutely.
mastering the mental game, your image, setting stop losses, and those, right? So I think it's 50-50. And so I think when you look at the market, or I think this is pretty objective, when you look at the market of poker content and where people spend their time and what people think about what it takes to be successful, they think it's like 90-10. They might not think it's 90-10, but they're actually spending 90-10. They're spending 90% of their time on the former. They're watching poker strategy or watching a live stream game, or they're watching the Hand of the Day show or anyone's version of it, anyone's version of the Hand of the Day, not necessarily mine, but they're watching that sort of content. 90-10. So what we did, at Conscious Poker is I spent like months building a course that was like at least 50-50 of the intangibles of the game. So like building a poker business plan, bankroll management, mindset, tilt control, using your image, setting stop losses, and setting goals, and like figuring out when you should play and what seat you should be in, like all these sorts of things, like whether you should play tournaments or cash games, understanding the variance in poker, like all these sort of business fundamental things. And so that's something I'm really excited about. And that was something that like really kept me motivated to like, keep the business side of things going and coaching and that sort of thing, because I think it's like an underserved part of the market. And so that's largely where I focus a lot of time with my time and energy and clients and students, because I feel like they're not that the strategy isn't important. Like we have a strategy membership as well, where it's 200 videos and 5 courses and the whole thing. But I just feel like everyone is being bombarded with this and nobody's talking about the other thing. And for me, that was actually the hardest thing to learn, were the intangibles. So, so that's really exciting to me, to like help people with these other things, because I think also those skills translate more into life as well than probably like learning when to call a 3-bet and that sort of thing. I think like emotional control is something that's like very important in all facets of life, or bankroll management, or risk reward, or that sort of thing is like more translatable to the business world. And a lot of people come to me, or clients and whatever, come from the business world, so it's like it's cool to speak that language, and I think that's a really helpful skill in poker and in life.
I absolutely agree, and notice that myself for sure. You're essentially running a small business when you're a poker player. I mean, you have to manage yourself and set all your own targets and your schedule, and you're really running like almost a mini business that you have to look outside of and not be emotionally attached to. Otherwise, you're just not going to see where it's going wrong. And you can have as much skill as you like, but if you go broke, that skill doesn't mean anything. So it's
totally
super important.
Yeah, that's the first thing I tell like clients and students, is to like think about all the financial decisions you make as if you were running a business, right? So they're like, oh, should I play this tournament, right? That's kind of what everyone is lured into, especially now coming up the WSOP. So I worked with a client yesterday, wants to play, the high roller on the WSOP, right? So,
okay.
100K and 50K buy-in, sure. But it's like, okay, what size cash games are you playing? And like, most likely, and he's a good player, but like most likely, you're going to lose in both of those events. Then you're going to rebuy in both those events. So you're looking at 300K, 100K times 2, 50K times 2. And then even if you do well in, the 5K, the 5K or the 10K main or the 5K side events or whatever, right? You play like 4 or 5 other events, and let's say those cumulative buy-ins are 30K, right? You play 5 other events, it's 30K of buy-ins. That's still a lot. Those are still big events. But now you have this 10-to-1 delta of you have 300K over here spread across 2 events versus 30K spread across 5 events. So like in these 2 events are 10 times more important as these other 5 events. So like even if you're a great player and you just run bad, like, or you just run average, and you like you cash in the 5K event and you earn 10K, which is still a good result, but you bust in the 100K and lose 200K, which is still an expected result. Like now your business plan is completely, like not completely, but it's like predominantly reliant on luck, right? And so like there's all these sorts of things to consider. Like maybe you can afford to play, but maybe from like a business standpoint you shouldn't play, or you should sell some action, because you want to stabilize your business, right? You don't want your business to be predominantly reliant on variance and luck, because that's not really a business, right? That's not how like the house works in Vegas. They kind of stabilize their bet sizes and whatever between what they allow people to bet in any one hand, right? They don't want to get wrecked. So and they rely on volume, right? So it's like all sorts of those considerations that I think are super important in poker.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you nail it on the head. It's basically like running a business. That's the way I think about it. That's basically what our whole academy is about, is like how to treat poker like a business.
How do you treat shot taking then?
So I actually, we have a whole module on this, buy-ins, stop losses. I call it win caps, meaning like an amount of money you win where you quit the game because you won so much, which I think is very prudent in shot taking. But I basically recommend like, I think shot taking makes a lot of sense. Just like it does, I consider venture capital, shot taking, right? Like in the real world, buying an altcoin is shot taking. Right? I mean, that's what it is. You're shot taking. It's frankly what it is. Think about it how you want, but it's basically like that. So, and I think that makes sense. I think you should have a small part of your portfolio for high risk asymmetric opportunities, right? But the key is that it's like it's high risk, and that you can afford it, and that you expect it to go to zero, right? Not that you're expected to lose, but you're expected to understand and appreciate and respect the variance. So a practical example, I have this happen all the time with clients in our academy. So, the question they have is like, I play 2-5, I want to move up to 5-10. When should I move up? How much money do I need? Very classic question. Probably someone listening has this question. Or maybe it's 1-3 to 2-5 or 5-10 to 10-20, but it doesn't matter. So let's say you have 20K or you have 25K, and you're like, well, I have too much for 2-5, but not quite enough for 5-10. So like how much money do I need to play 5-10? I would say like, you could maybe play 5-10 now, and you take 5K of your or 4K of your 25K, and that's your shot taking bankroll 4, 5, 10. So you have 4 buy-ins. You have 1K 4 times. I would never take a shot with 1 buy-in because you're not going to play well. You're not going to be used to the game. Yeah. It's going to be too stressful, too much pressure. And you're just going to dunk it off, right? But if you have 4 buy-ins, mentally when you sit down at the table the first time, you're like, okay, I could kind of play my game. I could make my moves. I could find my spots. I can be aggressive when I need to because I have 4 buy-ins. That's 4 buy-ins. You could even spread that out over 2 sessions. It's 2 buy-in stop loss, 2 sessions. Kind of feel like you have like an opportunity in this game, right, to like actually sustain. So you have 4K in that game, right? And if you lose that 4K, what happens to your bankroll? You still have 21K for 2-5, which is like still a lot. You're not like inhibiting your bankroll, right? And maybe a better example would be like if you had 30K and you took a 5K shot, so you still had 25K. That would be a little bit more responsible shot taking. But something like that where you're allocating, 10, 15, 20% of your bankroll for that asymmetric upside. And then if you win at the shot taking, you can continue to have that stop loss of 25K in your 2-5 bankroll, but everything you win over 25K could be used for 5-10. So if you start with 30K, you put 5K to 5-10 and you win 5K, now you have 10K for 5-10. And eventually you can move up, and maybe you can move up faster, because if you wanted to move up when you hit 40K, well, maybe you can get to 40K faster because you're winning at that game, right? And you can still move down when the 2-5 game is really good, or if you take a loss, you move back down right away so that you don't like bust your shot taking bankroll when you're losing or you're playing bad. You want to be very calculated with the shots that you take and make sure the game selection is really good, which we have module for that. Like all those sorts of intangibles about when to play a game or when to quit a game or stop losses and like what seat to be in and all that sort of stuff. But I think shot taking makes a lot of sense, but you have to do it right. Whereas not most people, but a lot of people just like, they're not so thoughtful about this whole process. They don't really have a system, and they just kind of take a shot and then they lose. And then, they're like, they put themselves in a spot where when they move down, they have to grind back a lot to get back up to that point. So you never want to be in a spot where like, if the shot taking goes wrong, you're detrimented in your current game. You never want to like ruin your nest egg, right? You always want to preserve that. And so if you shot take with 20% of your bankroll when your bankroll is decent and you lose, it doesn't really cost you that much because you just move back down to 2-5. You still have 25K for 2-5, which is plenty, and you're still fine. So it doesn't really cost you anything, but the upside could be really good. And that's kind of what you want to think about.
Yeah, exactly. I completely agree with all of that. And I think online, it's even harder to keep to the discipline. Like when you're live, like you have to buy in, it's maybe a bit easier to keep to those limits. But online, like it's so easy to just be like, oh, another one, it won't hurt. Another one is fine. Like, and sticking to those limits up and down either way, I think is really where the discipline comes in. And that's the toughest part for sure.
Yeah, that's why I think, like I said, I think the intangibles of poker are the hardest part. And then also to play well, like just think about that's another intangible. Like how strong is your mental game where, you're going to lose at that 5-10 game. And then you're going to go back down to 2-5. And like, how long are you going to take a break between that and moving down, right? So when are you going to play? You're going to play the next day? Probably shouldn't, right? You probably should take a break. What should you do during that break? How long should that break be? When should you come back down to 2-5? How are you going to play your best when you move back down to 2-5 to kind of keep your motivation going and not feel defeated, not feel like you're a bad player, and like still play your A game at that 2-5 game, right? So those are all part of the, intangibles of poker that I think are super, super important,
And in terms of live reads, like, what do you think about that? Is that something that's incredibly important or?
Yeah, incredibly important. Because there's just like certain spots where, like, let's say like, for example, you're on the river and a guy bets pot and you're getting 2-1, your break-even point's 33%. So you're basically saying like, okay, I need 33% equity to call here. And let's say like, you run the math and, you think he's bluffing like about that percentage of the time. So, it's kind of like a break-even call from a fundamental standpoint or a game theory standpoint or equities versus ranges standpoint, however you want to kind of consider that, book play, like from the book, it's kind of break even. But like, there's certain spots on the river in live poker, like if you play enough live poker where you're like almost certain that your opponent is not bluffing. I think it's almost a little bit harder to be certain that they are bluffing, but I guess it depends on the situation. But there's certain spots in poker where you're just like, this guy's not bluffing here.
Okay.
He's just not, based on like his mannerisms, his actions, and like his bet size and like his, this texture of the board and how this guy plays. Like he's just not bluffing. you know. And so if you have that delta between like, you know, what the book says to do and what you actually do in real time because of like some live read, you know, it could be anything. It could just like, I think people condense live reads into like, oh, you know, he moved his head to the left and he's, you know, bluffing, like kind of like a like quintessential Teddy KGB eating his Oreos and rounders. Like it's not that like superficial or pronounced, right? It could just be like the whole energy of the situation, right? Like I don't want to sound, you know, whatever, but like the way that the guy behaves and acts and moves and moves his chips and like just the way he plays, you know, the way you kind of understand this person in this moment, he's just not likely to be bluffing here. You know, maybe it's the end of the night, he's winning and whatever, and it's just like those are something that just happen live. You know, you don't really know that the person's in that mental state when you play online because you don't know that it's the end of the night. You know, you're playing a game, it's about to break, and like all these sorts of, you have all this information live that you don't have online.
Yeah,
that's why I think it's a better game. That's why I think, you know, the edges are bigger, and that's why I think that it's the best format of poker because you just have more information. So the best players use that information to make better decisions. And so you have all that information live. And if you're ever in a spot where like, you know, someone has something or doesn't, and they don't come up often. I don't want to say like you're just not looking at your cards and reading people the whole night. You know, it doesn't happen that often, I don't think. But maybe it'll happen, you know, in my game, let's say I play 4 to 6 a.m. or something, like, you know, 14 hours or 18 hours. You know, maybe it'll happen like 2-3 times a night. But usually when it happens, it's in a big spot, right? Like it doesn't happen, you know, when they see bet the flop for a third of the pot and you're like, oh, live read. Like it usually happens when, you know, it's a 3-bet pot and, you know, they bet the flop and they bet the turn and then like they bomb the river and like, do they have it or not? You know, and like it doesn't always happen in that spot, but it often happens in those types of spots where, you know, it's a 50 big blind bet on the river, right? Those are the spots where you typically get the reads. They're not like in these small pots when someone c-bets the flop in a single raise pot, button to big blind. You're not going to have a read, right? It's not a big spot. So when they happen and it's 50 big blinds, and if it happens twice a night, you know, that's 100 big blinds that like you are pretty certain you're making the right decision for 100 big blinds, you know, and that's a lot of money. Like when you think about win rates in poker, you know, if you're winning a couple big blinds an hour or something like that, you know, if you're making 1 or 2 decisions for 50 big blinds where, you know, you're 80%, you're not going to be 100% certain, but if you're 80% certain, you know, that's pretty big because a lot of times in poker, situations based on the math are close, right? Like I said before, the 2-to-1 example where you go through the math and it's kind of break even from a book standpoint, but you're 80% sure this guy's bluffing or 80% sure he's not bluffing. You're like, fuck it, I'm just going to go with what I think, you know? And so that adds up a lot. And that's why I said those things are kind of like, you can't really teach that. No, it's like, I don't think that's something you can teach. That's something you either have to be like, you know, have a high EQ, or you have to have a lot of experience, or you have to, you know, understand people well, or you have to be good at reading your opponents. Like that's something that, I mean, maybe you can teach, you know, maybe you can go to like a body language course or like something like that, you know, but like you'd have to be pretty damn committed to like, you know, want to learn that skill. And like, I think certain people are just better at it, right? Certain people are better at engaging other people than others, you know, and that really matters in a big high stakes setting in a live felt.
Have you ever got it drastically wrong in a big game?
Have I ever like made a big mistake with my read?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, absolutely.
Any memorable ones and why?
Yeah. I got bluffed. So in my big game recently, I mean, past 2 months, like I got bluffed in a big spot where like I just didn't think the guy would bluff me, you know, and I folded like top pair, top kicker in a 3-bet pot, and the guy just was bluffing, and like I was wrong. I mean, I think I get it right more than I get it wrong, but I also would say like in that spot I was wrong with my decision, but I didn't think the guy would be bluffing, but it wasn't. I'm sure I've got this wrong when I had a strong read too. I can't remember a specific hand, and I'm sure I've done it, but I would say like in that spot, I didn't have like one of those super strong soul read situations where I'm like, I just know this guy doesn't have it here, or I just know this guy has it here. Like those spots don't come up as often when you get this sort of like, almost like the sensation you get when you meet someone for the first time where you're like, something's just wrong. I don't like this person. Or, you know, I'm really this person's really cool. I'm really connected to them. Usually it's the negative where you meet someone that you don't like, and it's just like kind of like a weird vibe you get, and you're just like, I got to stay away. Those sensations don't come up often, but I feel like when that strong of like a intuitive sensation comes up in a situation, I'm usually pretty right with a high degree of accuracy. So those are things I listen to, but I've definitely got it wrong. I got it wrong in that hand, and I can't think of them now, but I'm definitely sure there's others.
I'm sure.
But overall, like in my career, listening to that has been definitely a source of profit.
Did you see the hand recently with Daniel Negreanu where he folded full house on high stakes poker?
No, I don't think.
Okay, that one was a pretty interesting one about folding on the river with a full house. But yeah, I'll leave that to you in your own time. No worries.
Yeah, send me the link after. I'd love to check it out. But no, I didn't see.
It was pretty interesting. He folded to a worse full house actually, who check raised on the river. But it was quite a interesting spot. He said,
"Yeah, for sure. I'd love to watch it." He definitely has some good reads. I mean, he's a good example of someone that just is very good at this intangible aspect of poker, and I think he just kind of learned that on the streets, and that's just one of his superpowers.
Yeah, for sure. Who were some of the toughest players you've ever played?
I played with all of them, I think. I mean, the people that people would know, I would say, like, trying to think of like, I guess it depends on where you follow poker, but I played, Ivy was really tough. I played with Nicholas Heinecker, who was Reagan 70 online. Mm-hmm. He was like the biggest winner on PokerStars in 2015 or 2014. We played a lot of the high stakes games in Macau. Chow Ren, who's Michael Turitz, was up there as well. Andy Mosley as well played those big games. So I think those are the toughest players. They're not very well known, but like in the high stakes cash game scene, they're the elite players of the game.
What was the toughest thing about Ivy? Why was it so tough?
I guess the toughest thing about all of them, maybe this is relevant to Ivy too, but like also the other players, is just that like they're capable of making. They're very, very good at hand reading. So they're like very good at understanding like which cards are good for them versus which cards are good for you. And they're just applying a lot of pressure credibly on cards that are good for them, So like, I don't know, let's say like, they check call the flop, like 10-9-4, they check call, and the turn's a 7 and they check call and the river's a 9, and like you don't have any 9s there because you bet the flop and bet the turn, but like they could be check calling with a 9 and like you're just scared to bet the river with aces because like maybe they'll check raise you and you don't know if they're going to check raise you with a 9 or with a bluff or with a boat. And so you're just like always kind of scared to put money in the pot without the nuts, but like you never really have the nuts, right? Because usually in poker range you have a hand that's in the middle of your range, right? You have a bluff catcher or like a thin value bet. Even if you have top pair on the river, if you get raised, you're always bluff catching. You're never like they're never raising a worse hand for value. So you're always in this spot against them where you're like scared to put money in the pot because it's like they might make a move. And so basically you kind of have to settle into this place where, and this is what I was talking about with like the coming full circle, like talking about with the 250 big blinds or 500 big blinds or whatever. You have to be comfortable in these spots where you're just going to like be completely detached from the money, which I think is harder as you play bigger. But you're going to have to be completely detached from the money, and you're just going to have to be comfortable like playing big pots with marginal hands. And I think the best players make you play big pots with marginal hands kind of on their terms, right? Like they're not just bluffing into you when you 3-bet them pre-flop. They're just bombing away their stack. Like they're doing it calculated in spots where they can rep credible hands that you can't have, right? And so you just have to get comfortable doing that. And I think that was rising to the challenge of playing with really good players is that you kind of, it forces you to get to do that, and it forces you to kind of just accept like I have to bet this hand here because I have such a strong hand, and if I get raised I have to evaluate that afterwards. But I'm not just gonna check this river every time because I'm scared of being raised. And then if you start checking that river every time, now they can just call you on the flop and turn, and they can get the showdown for free. And they know you're not going to bluff them. And then when you bet the river, you're bluffing more often than you're value betting because, you're not value betting thin enough. So like they can just start calling you. So you just start to like completely deteriorate your game because of these players and their image. So you really have to that was the hardest part about playing against the best players, is that you really have to just you have to stick to you have to put up a wall and stick to it, and you have to be as strong as they are. And I think that's really the challenge of playing against great players, is you just can't let them out aggressive you, outmaneuver you, and out scare you. And I think a lot of people see a good player and then they just completely play this straightforward game. And then the good player becomes even better because now they've realized that you're playing that way. Mm-hmm. And they can just completely attack the open spots in your game, but you've made your game even more open because of your fear of this person. So I've had it both ways. My first encounters with these games in Macau, playing, the big game for the first time and playing against these players that are putting you to all these decisions, right? And they're more experienced in the big game than I was because they've been playing it longer than me. And so I was kind of the underdog in that spot. And then I feel like I kind of, over time played that game for 3 years, kind of figured out those spots and stood up. And then I've been in the other spot where people, have seen me play on TV and make some cool plays and whatever. And then I felt that they've played the way against me that I played it, in the beginning. And then I'm like, oh shit, this is so easy in this spot because this guy's never going to have this hand here, or he's never going to call here. And then so it makes those players easy to play against for me. So being on both sides of it kind of helped me to realize the holes in the other person's game, and then to not do that when I'm on the other side of it too. When I'm playing against someone that's really aggressive, I'm like, I know what I have to do because I've done it to other people. So I think that's really helped me. But yeah, that's really what the hard part is, and I think how you have to adjust.
Yeah, it's a complete mind game. Let's go with scheduling. How do you prepare a schedule, preparation? What goes into all of that?
For what? For cash games?
Yeah.
So, I mean, at this point, in my poker journey, at this point, it's kind of doesn't really work like that because my games are just very it's just a very small player pool, and they're kind of exclusive and whatever, and they're only going to run at certain times. So it's not and it was kind of like this in Macau too. It was the game started at 10 p.m. and you had to have a seat or be invited, or you knew the game even at the Wynn and the public casinos, you knew the game, was going to start at 3 or 4 p.m. and you just had to go. You have to play at 3 or 4 p.m. right? That's when the game is, and you have to go there, and that's when you have to play. So it's almost at the higher levels of poker, I think it's almost more structured in a way because you're playing with a small ecosystem, a small group of players. The reality of poker is that one whale baits the other whales. So whoever's the biggest VIP or the second biggest VIP or the third biggest VIP sort of dictates when that game is going to go. And they're usually going to want to play when they want to play, and whenever they want to play, the other players that are worse than them that want to play with them sort of adjust their schedules to play with those people. So our game at this point, operates like that, and it starts at a certain time. The games in the Wynn did that kind of too. And so the last 5 or 7 years, or 10 years, whatever, operated that way. Where when you're in the high stakes environment, you just kind of play when the game is, and you don't really have much by the way of scheduling. But I will say that building your life around that game is ends up being what's happened, because you have to I know that on Fridays at 4, Sundays at 4, I have to be at my best. So I would say that affects most aspects of my schedule, where I don't want to weight train on Fridays and Sundays, and it's hard on Saturdays and Mondays because I don't sleep on Fridays and Sundays, so it's hard to weight train on those other days. I know I have Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday to lift heavy weights because I don't want to break down muscle and be tired during the game, so I do cardios on Fridays and Sundays, and then I swim on Sundays and Mondays. So I would say most of my life is built around being in an optimal peak performance mode during those 16-hour stretches where I have to play. So I'll also fast. I'll have very light food. I won't eat a lot because I don't want to break down. I don't want my body to break down food and be tired during the game. So a lot of things go into being in this level of peak performance during the times that I'm playing at these high levels. So as you move up in stakes, you have less choice of when you play, because the games only exist when they exist, and that's not contingent on you because you're the pro. So nobody cares when you want to play. And so you just play when other people want to play. And so you have to adjust your schedule to play when those games are the best. That's the reality of life at high stakes poker. Also in the tournaments, right? Like, you know, tournaments start at certain days and they're in certain cities at certain times. If you want to play those high stakes tournaments, you go to those cities. But if you have choice over when you play, because you play, you know, $50 online, and you play 24 hours a day or whatever, like I would much prefer to do the former, where like I live a normal life and I fit poker into my life rather than living a poker life and you know, my life fits into poker. So given the choice, I would say that would be much more optimal. Like I've pushed for our games to start at noon because it would be like I get up at like, you know, today I got up at 7, but like normally I get up a lot earlier on a normal day when I'm not in my poker mode, because like that's how I like to operate my life. I like to get up early and go to bed early and whatever. So I would love to play poker from like, you know, 9 a.m. or 10 a.m. until 6 p.m. or something like that. But it's not always the reality. So I think if you can, like I know some people in Vegas that would kind of try and do a hybrid of both, where they would want to play in the best games that ran late at night when on weekends when people are drunk and, you know, people are tired and they're stuck and they're losing, right? The best poker game is when those things happen. That always happens late at night because nobody starts the game stuck at 10 a.m. Nobody's stuck at noon. Yep. So what they would do is they would basically, you know, take like Thursdays, Fridays off, or like Wednesday, Thursday off, Friday off, or something like that. And then they would play like Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, or whatever. And they would get up at like 4 a.m. and they would play like through the night when everyone else was stuck and they were fresh, and they would like hop into the game. You know, so it just depends on how you want to operate it. But I think for most people, like the reality is that like they're going to have an, you know, poker for most people is like a secondary thing, right? It's not their primary thing. So they're going to have a certain amount of time where they can play poker. So like a lot of clients I work with, it's like, you know, after work, 2 days a week when their kids aren't doing something, or like they don't have external commitments after work. You know, they don't have jujitsu or they don't have whatever. And then it's going to be one day on the weekend from this time window. And so I think like for most people, it's about optimizing that time to play and then transitioning from whatever it is you're doing in your normal life into poker mode, and kind of having like a ritual transition to get yourself ready to play poker, and like leave the problems of the day or the problems of work or life or stress, whatever, away from the table, so that when you're at the table, you can just be like in that zone where, you know, you're in, you know, you and the table are in color and the, you know, everything else is black and white, right? You're just like completely zoned into what you're doing. You're in flow, and you can just play great poker. And so for most people, they're gonna have to deal with the reality of like being able to do that, and they're gonna have to kind of engineer that peak performance mode, because they're only going to have a certain amount of time to play, and they kind of have to play during those times, right? Either because the games only run in their local casino, or they just like are only free on Saturday afternoons, and that's when they have to play poker. So I think you really got to figure out how to engineer yourself to be like in the best state of mind possible to play during those times. And I think that's something that can be learned. You know, it's not like great. I don't think great days are had. I think they're kind of built. And so like there's certain things you can do to like be, you know, have a great day, or certain things you can do to have like, you know, be in the best mindset possible to play winning poker, at least to give yourself the best chance. Yeah, I built a whole module on that in the academy, but it's, you know, there's a whole thing you can do, right, to be your best self. And so you got to figure that out, and that's part of it. You know, that's like a ongoing thing. I think it's like you got to treat yourself like an athlete and be ready for game day. And I think I played, you know, 25 sessions this year, 30 sessions, and I've never missed a workout before a session. You know, so like that's just one thing, but there's a lot of things like that where, you know, I'm doing every single session to be ready.
Yeah, it's super, super important. And like you said, I think any athlete, if you look at their preparation and being part of peak performance it's a massive part of it. You can't just show up and expect to win. You know, there's a lot that goes into it. So same for poker, especially at the highest levels.
No question. Absolutely.
So tell us anything. What would be like some of the craziest or funniest stories you have from poker?
You know, I should know this because there's so many, but I kind of feel like it's one of those things where I'm like overwhelmed with a choice, and I don't know, my head doesn't know where to start or where to begin. I am I'm working on, like, you know, I've been doing this for years because I've kind of pick it up and put it down, but like a book on the life of high stakes poker and my journey playing, you know, coming up online and playing in Macau and playing in Vegas and just traveling the world to play different events. So it's basically like two parallel plots where like there's the main plot of like, starting out the life of high stakes poker in Macau and like that whole experience of the Chinese economy booming and kind of like discovering this gold mine in Macau, and that's like the main plot. And then the secondary plot are like these series of flashbacks where the character who's based on me and my circle of friends in the high stakes poker community, where like there's all these other series of events of like first starting to play poker, discovering poker, home games, playing online, traveling to events for the first time. And so like in there I try and preserve some of these stories, but I feel like I have to do it kind of consciously because like I said, there's so many and I have to kind of think through periods of my life to where like the characters come alive and the stories come out. But I probably should have a good answer to this because I feel like I'm asked quite often in podcasts, so I think I need to do a better job of like bringing 2 or 3 to mind. I'm also asked these like at random dinner parties when people hear about poker, they kind of want to know something anecdotal that happened. So I'm sorry I don't have a good answer, but I am working on putting these together, and I feel like I'll get some good ones if I ever finish that book. And my goal is to turn it into a screen, not necessarily a screenplay, more like a TV show. But
yeah, that could be
I think
fun.
we could recount a lot in there.
Yeah, it would be fun for sure. So what's in the future for Alec Torelli?
I guess it depends on what timeline. I think I'll always play some poker. I don't think I'm playing a lot of poker now. I think this is as much poker as I would want to play at this point in my life. 2 days a week, like long sessions, 30 hours a week is a lot. Because it ends up being all encompassing. So I think going back and forth between playing poker, it's like for the next 2 months, I think I'm going to take off, travel and, live life. And like, I miss that part of life of like traveling and just being spontaneous and adventurous. That was kind of what drew me to poker. And so,
where are you going to go?
So I'm supposed to go back to Italy. I think that's the most likely thing.
Oh, okay.
So I have dual citizenship. My wife is Italian. She's from there. And, so we have a place there, and we spend part of the year there every year. So that'll be fun. This will be a great time to go see family, have friends there, and a social circle there, and a life there. So that would be cool. So I miss kind of that, and then we'll travel some places in between, or while we're there, take some trips around different areas. But yeah, like I miss that part. I think that'll be like always a part of my life, and then I like coaching, but I think going forward, I'll probably do something in like after like maybe in 3 years or something. Do something in the investment space. Like I could see myself starting like taking all the knowledge and experience I've learned through investing and trading in crypto and venture capital and starting like a fund, like a hedge fund of some kind where I'm like investing in asymmetric opportunities in the crypto space mainly. Okay. And in the startup space, but mainly like the crypto space. And I think that would be like very fun to do as like a next sort of step where it's like you're still sort of playing poker, like you're still kind of doing the same things. Like you learn the language of poker and you see the world through the lens of poker, like in terms of risk reward and bankroll management and emotional control and detaching yourself from results and focusing on the process and all these sort of like principles that can then help you make decisions or thrive in another environment. Kind of like I said before, like, you have to find a hammer and then find a bunch of nails. Whereas I think like, transitioning to do something completely different would be kind of out of touch from what I'm really great at. But I think, those skills I've learned in poker and then combined with my experience in 5 years in crypto and trading and learning, like I think it would be fun to play a different game at a very high level, and it's kind of like a bigger game too, so you're kind of like climbing a different mountain, whereas like I feel like in poker I've kind of done everything I really wanted to do in poker, frankly. I mean, maybe aside from win the main event, I think like the childhood dream of me would be like, okay, maybe win the main event. So I don't think I'm even going to play this year because I'll be in Italy, but like throughout my life I'll play the main event. But aside from that, I don't think winning more in poker is that meaningful to me at this point. Whereas like doing something in the business space, in a different game with a different language, with different players, different people, it's a different story. I think that would be very fun. So like maybe a hedge fund or something like that would be very cool to do. And then I like writing a lot and sharing and learning things and then sharing them with other people. So I think I'll continue to do that through various mediums like my Twitter, my YouTube, and stuff like that. And those things are very fun and meaningful to me. So we'll see where that takes me.
All right. Awesome. Very, very interesting. So we'll finish with a rapid fire. We'll just do some quick questions and see what we get.
Sure.
All right. Are you ready?
Let's go.
All right. Favorite poker player?
I don't know. I'm so biased because like now like favorite poker player would be like a friend of mine, you
Yeah,
know, so
that's
I
okay.
don't know. I guess let's say growing up, because that would be like more the poker fan in me before I was like
Mhm.
colleagues with a lot of the people, you know, in social circle. I would say growing up, my favorite player was probably Ivy or Negreanu.
Cool. Favorite venue and why?
The Wynn Macau, and I just, you know, that was my home for so long. You know, like I lived 50 meters from the Wynn Macau in this high-rise condo right next to it. And like, you know, so much of my poker career and life and memories and friends were built there. So that was like home to me.
Fair enough.
Yeah, nothing will replace that.
What do you love the most about poker?
Um, the people you meet and challenging to always be the best version of myself.
What are you best at in poker?
I'm my own worst critic. And so I'm very hard on myself and I demand near perfection always. And so that keeps me getting better. And I think that's really important. I'm always also very open-minded and willing to learn. And so I think that keeps me relevant in the strategies that are going on in the game.
Okay. What are you worst at?
Sometimes I'm stubborn to let ego get in the way, and that maybe clouds some judgment or decision making. And I still struggle with, you know, being objective and like being the most patient possible in the spots and detaching myself from making the decision as if I wasn't in the hand. You know, it's so easy to analyze the hand when you're not in it. But when you're in it in the heat of the moment, you know, for a myriad of reasons, it's sometimes hard to make the best decision. And that's a lifelong challenge.
Yeah, difficult to remove the humanity.
Yeah.
Best thing about being a poker player?
The freedom.
The worst thing?
Constantly questioning, you know, yourself and the game and your own ability.
Okay. If poker disappeared tomorrow, what would you do?
Investing.
The best book you've read lately?
The Changing World Order by Ray Dalio.
Favorite movie?
I don't watch many movies. I don't have a great answer. I'm sorry.
No worries. Tell us something most people don't know about you.
So this was a fun one. I told this. So this is a icebreaker because we all know each other very well. But something that happened in my game where, like, you know, we always have new players coming in from, frankly, all over the country, all over the world in our game, and so we kind of do this like questioning. And so I said that I was in musical theater in high school, and I starred in a musical called Les Miserables, and I was Javert, which is like, you know, the main character in this in the musical industry, this quite famous musical in high school. And so that's something most people don't know. But in my game, they this one guy was like, you know, like basically like, do you have a show of this? Do you have a performance of this? And I was like, I do. So like eventually I found this old tape, you know, like on a VHS. It was like in high school, and I got it transcribed onto a flash disc, and then like I played it at my game, and you know, they made me show this fucking thing. So anyway, that's something that most people know. That's also a funny story.
That's hilarious. You're gonna have to release that now on YouTube.
And oh my god, I know, right?
Favorite place in the world?
Man, that's tough. I would say maybe Bali, Indonesia. We were married there. And Antibes in the south of France.
Okay. And proudest life moment?
Perilous life moment?
Proudest life moment.
Oh, proudest life moment.
Yep.
That's a good question. Good question. You're putting me on the spot. You know, I think probably just like I guess there's two. I guess like, you know, getting married to my wife, and then so we did a vow renewal ceremony.
Okay, cool.
9 years of marriage.
Awesome.
And you know, we've had a great marriage. We've been, you know, together the whole time, and supportive of each other the whole time. And so like that vow renewal ceremony was this past February, and so that kind of like, you know, celebrated this whole thing. And like, so just kind of seeing those two moments, these two snapshots in time, you know, basically a decade apart, and then seeing like where our life has come and what we've built together since then that was really awesome. We have we have a great relationship. I'm really lucky. She's an amazing wife, and we're really supportive of each other. So that probably was it.
What would you say was the ingredients for success in terms of your relationship?
Well, I mean, you gotta, like, there's certain like things where you gotta pick the right, you gotta pick the right partner for you, and that's kind of like a part of the choice, and you gotta have a little bit of luck. But I think, we're we're both always fighting for each other. We're both like very supportive of each other, and we both like really, want each other to succeed and do well. And so we're always like, contributing to each other's future and interested in each other's things. We're always like learning things about each other, and we really enjoy spending time together. I think that's so important. We're also, faithful to each other, which is I think very, helpful in a relationship, because I think trust is, one of the most important things. And so when you kind of preserve that through your fidelity in your relationship, I think that's really been huge. So it's been awesome.
Awesome. Well, Alec, tell everybody where they can find you.
Well, a few places. So I'm just at Alec Torelli, so AlecTorelli on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And then I have multiple channels for various interests. So my poker content is all on ConsciousPoker, so ConsciouSpoker, poker. So like youtube.com/ConsciousPoker or ConsciousPoker.com. Free content, material, hand reading system, pre-flop charts, poker training, the academy, coaching, whatever, at ConsciousPoker.com. And then YouTube, 500-600 videos on pretty much everything on poker. And then I think my crypto content is on Cryptorelli, so CRYPTORELLI. So crypto, like youtube.com/Cryptorelli. I have a YouTube channel for crypto that I started last year. And so that's been very fun. And then I write a newsletter on crypto, so alectorelli.substack.com. All things in the crypto space. I have Telegram and Discord. All links are in my Twitter bio. And then alectorelli.com is just more information about me and keynote speaking and stuff like that. So yeah, just depends on what interest you're in. But those are the mediums. So come say hi. I'm like very friendly on social media. I'm on Twitter the most, and my DMs are open. Come say hi if you have any questions or whatever. Happy to answer, or point you in the right direction of something that could hopefully help you on your journey. So thanks, everyone.
Get in touch with him, guys. This has been absolutely awesome, and really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, it's been fun. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Well, everybody, take care. Thank you so much for stopping by, and see you soon.